Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025, where your Cleveland Cavaliers are the undisputed best team in the NBA right now. Jason is somewhere in the Bahamas at an undisclosed location. He did send me a text that he watched last night's game, so kudos to him for finding a way to stream the Cavs. Hey, maybe easier to watch the Cavs in international waters than it is in the city of Cleveland if you don't have the proper apps. So Jason's out. I called in two friends to talk about the Cavs today. We have Ethan Sands and Tony Pesta. We're going to have Mac Perry on too, but Mac unfortunately had to drop. I was going to call this the Knights of the Cavs table and assemble some of the brightest Cavs minds on the internet. But without Mac, I don't feel like we can call ourselves the Knights of the Cavs table with just three of us. But what's up, guys? Happy New Year, Ethan, Tony. How you guys doing?
Happy New Year to you, Tony, and everybody. Mikey, appreciate you having me on. It's great to make your debut in the first day of the new year, ain't it?
You've been on UCSS in 2025 more than Jay Crawford, more than Adam the Bull, more than G. Bush, more than Earl, more than anyone. So you two are officially on the payroll. I didn't even think of that, but this is the first UCSS show of the new year. So, Tony, how you doing, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's, we're starting 2025 out strong, making my debut here. It's always great to talk basketball with you guys, so I appreciate it. And, let's push some agendas. That's what we're here for.
Let's do it. Well, the Cavs beat the Lakers last night. They're 3-0 on this current West Coast road trip, and their win streak has been extended now to 8 games. It's their third 7-game win streak of the season or longer thus far, which is kind of just absurd. 29-4, Ethan, and there doesn't seem to be any signs of this team slowing down in the near future. It's a wagon right now, to say the least.
And you talk about the 8-game win streak, right? And I don't think it goes, you can go much farther into that. The Cavs won each of their last 8 games by double digits. It's only the second time that's happened in franchise history, guys. The other stretch was in 2008, and they just beat the guy that was leading that team. But more importantly, it hasn't mattered who they played or if the games were back-to-backs or anything. As you mentioned, Mike, 29-4 and have the best offense in the league and are a true title contender. I mean, they, over the last 13 games in the month of December, they were a top 5 defense as well as a top 5 offense, just showcasing how brute strength this team is and how good they can be going into the new year. But the Cavs have poised to them that even in close games, ugly games, even looking back to Monday's contest against the Warriors, where both teams combined for 31 points in a quarter, the law of averages deems that their shooting percentages that are off the charts and a lot of people consider to be fluky aren't a fluke, since they can revert back to those at any time throughout a run that is both created from their stellar offense and an increase in focus on the defensive end, or in the words of the Cavs players in the locker room, locking in. Specifically to the last 2 games, the Cavs went on a 20-5 run 2 days ago against the Golden State Warriors over 2 quarters, and then they went on a 19-5 run last night against the Los Angeles Lakers. So you talk about how this team can switch it on at any time. It poses problems for almost every team in the NBA.
Tony, what have you learned about the this Cavs team over the last 2 games, or really the last 3 games on this West Coast road trip?
I've learned that it's just a good time to be a fan of Cleveland Cavaliers basketball. Not only is this team winning all these games in a row, they're 29-4, they have the best record in basketball, but they're doing it in dominant fashion. Even like you mentioned, the Golden State game started off pretty ugly. That was not a fun first half of basketball for either team, but you could see at the end of the second quarter, Darius Garland starts getting it going a little bit. Jarrett Allen's coming alive. And then in the third quarter, it's Donovan Mitchell stepping up. I think he started the third quarter with 3 straight 3-pointers. And all of a sudden, they're rolling and it's a Cavalanche and we're up by 20. And we've seen that all year, where this is the benefit of having a core 4 and having so many quality depth pieces, is that even when 1 or 2 guys are having an off night, you have other people who can step up and lead the way. And when everyone's clicking, it gets ridiculous. One stat that I stood out to me the most during this streak is that they've hit 18 or more 3-pointers in 7 straight games. That's insane. Just for reference, they had 18 or more 3-pointers in 13 total games last season. They've done it 7 straight right now, and they've already done it 12 times overall this year. They lead the NBA in 3-point percentage. They're shooting 40% on 40 attempts, which is insane. I'm sure that's close to an NBA record, if not on track for an NBA record. And so I am expecting, we'll see the numbers dip a little bit at some point. But as Ethan mentioned, it's 2025 now, and they're still shooting the lights out. This is like a big sample size that we're working with. So when you combine that level of 3-point shooting, which I think we could have only hoped to see for this Cavs team, with the defense that, that's what they've hung their hat on the last 3 years, and they've shown they can still lock in when necessary. You combine both ends of the floor and you get what looks like the best team in basketball right now.
It is so much fun to watch this team. And I was with a bunch of people last night for New Year's Eve, and we had the game on. And someone asked me beforehand, do the Lakers have any chance to beat the Cavs tonight? This is a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis. And it was a serious question. Can the Lakers beat the Cavs? And my answer was, if LA plays a perfect game and Cleveland plays like crap, yeah, they have a chance. Like, that's how well the Cavs are playing at this point, where I legitimately go into every contest thinking, if Cleveland is going to lose tonight, it's because the other team plays essentially a perfect game, and Cleveland just has one of those nights. I go back to the Miami game. You call it the South Beach flu, you call it schedule loss, whatever, but it takes a weird circumstance like that for the Cavs to lose. They're 29-4. Could you have imagined when the season started? I told you the calendar is going to flip and the Cavs have fewer losses than you have fingers on one hand. Like, none of us, we would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. The Oklahoma City Thunder are having a terrific regular season. And they're a distant second to Cleveland in terms of the accomplishments thus far in just the 2024 portion of the year. The Cavs can beat you with offense. They can beat you with defense. They have about 3 or 4 different guys that at any given point in a game can take over. We saw Jarrett Allen dominate Anthony Davis last night. Like, not just for a 6-minute stretch, the entire game. And when you're getting contributions like that from Jarrett Allen, who at this point, I think we all are pretty confident in saying that he's the Cavs' 4th best player. Not that there's an issue with being the bottom rung of the core 4, but if you're ranking importance, he's the least important, or I don't want to say important. He's the least statistically like high profile of the 4. And he just outplayed a guy who I think is a top 10 player in the league. So you have the highs of a Jarrett Allen. You know what you're getting from Donovan Mitchell. And I think the best part of all this, and this is what makes me most excited moving forward, I don't think any Cav played more than 65 total minutes on that back-to-back, right? And maybe Kenny hasn't even pushed his foot all the way on the accelerator yet if they need to. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who works for a Western Conference team, and I was like, this is going to sound like a really dumb question. But are the Cavs too good? Like, what's going to happen when a playoff situation comes around and they haven't had any experience in close games or closing out games? And I go back to the Utah situation where they hacked to Kessler, and Kenny was like, yeah, we were bored. We just wanted to kind of try something in our end of games. They're bored. They're so good. And it's incredible. And we have over 400 people in here watching right now who are like, yeah, they're awesome. And guess what? I don't think we've ever had 400 people within the first 8 minutes of a Cavs show. So thank you for watching. Happy New Year. And the Cavs are freaking amazing. I don't know what else to say.
I mean, you talk about the close game situations where it gets finicky, where you talk about where the Cavs are because they haven't been in those situations. And you mentioned the Utah Jazz game and those different situations. I look back to the Milwaukee Bucks, the back-to-back series against the same team where you get to play against a Giannis-less Bucks where Damian Lillard goes off. And then you go up against a Damian and Giannis team that scored, I believe it was 70+ between the two of them, just those two alone. And in both of those games, the stars of the Cavs showed out and showed up in the crucial clutch time of the game. And that was the portion of the season where we were talking about Darius Garland as one of the most clutch players in the NBA. So you talk about Donovan Mitchell having his quote-unquote first game winner in the NBA, as he called it. And then you look a little bit further and say Darius Garland out-dueled a future Hall of Famer and Damian Lillard. Like, come on. It's in a conversation needs to be had about where this team is, but also the future of what is going on. And obviously you can look and say, oh, they might not have had the toughest schedule, but that doesn't take into account that most of the teams that we didn't think were going to be losing in the beginning of the season were bad. Orlando wasn't good. Milwaukee wasn't good. Philly wasn't good. So those records don't get taken into account, that those teams are still going to be in contention when it comes down to April, May, and June. But I definitely think that the Cavs have earned the respect of a lot of different teams. And you mentioned it, saying that another team has to play perfect for them to be even in the contest with the Cavs. You have the same notion as JJ Redick, the Los Angeles Lakers head coach. So if a head coach of a team, one of the brightest minds in the NBA, one of the best analysts that we've seen, says that the Cavs are playing on an untouched earth, that needs to be heard and needs to be said on multiple occasions when it comes to what this team has been doing.
And real quick on, just the point that so far they haven't played many close games, but that's the value of having the continuity of this team where they've been together 3 years and they've been through quite a lot of adversity, whether it's the Knicks series, which I know no one wants to think about right now, or just, they've been in 3 playoff series now. They've been through some things together. And so that's why I know we're going to talk about are they real title contenders? Why aren't people taking them seriously later? But I think this is one aspect that gets overlooked, is that this isn't like a complete come out of nowhere story where the Cavs, no one expected them to be this good. Now, I don't think we expected them to be 29-4, but they've been together for a while. There have been people saying that, hey, they got a lot of potential. They got 4 young guys who are very good. And I think some of the fit issues are a little overblown. And here we are now in their 3rd year together. Everything's falling into place. And it's not a fluke, I think, is the main point there, is that they've been trending upwards. Last year was weird because of injuries and a lot of other things, but it shouldn't be such a surprise that we are where we are now. And again, they haven't played many close games this year, but they do have that adversity in the past. And I think it's really, especially for someone like Darius Garland, the fact that he started the year as one of the most clutch players in the NBA, that was never a strength for him. And so I think you learn from those mistakes. And I think just all around, everyone on this Cavs team has matured, and we're seeing the results of that.
I try not to look at the chat while we are live until the end, but I was alerted that we have some Cavs royalty in the chat today. So shout out to Carter Rodriguez from the Chase Down Pod for tuning in. Carter, we appreciate you hanging out with the good people out there, talking some Cavs. Check out the Chase Down Pod with him and Justin. They do a great job. But I saw one thing from Tom Habistro yesterday that I wanted to point out before we move on to our next topic. But Tom over at Yahoo Sports had a pretty cool line graph, and I'll put the link to it in the chat here in a second. But the Cavs are now actually shooting more threes than the Celtics this season by just the slightest of margins. And on this 8-game win streak, well, let me go back. In their first 10 games of the season, the Cavs didn't shoot more than 42 threes in any game. On this current 8-game win streak, these are their 3-point attempts each game. 50, 47, 47, 43, 46, 48, 47, and 46 last night. That is directly correlated to Evan Mobley being more comfortable and taking some extra 3-pointers. No one else really has a big variance in terms of their average 3-point attempts per game, except for Evan Mobley. And that's why you see part of that increase. And on that 8-game win streak, to tie back to what Ethan said earlier, they're beating everyone by double digits. And I think their average margin of victory over this 8-game win streak is like 16.4 points, if I saw that correctly. It's something absurd. And I don't think it's a correlation or a coincidence, that as Evan Mobley continues to become more confident from 3 and is willing to take and make those open shots, and even some contested ones now, which I really love to see, everything else in this offense fits into place even more beautifully than it had before. So I know some people, we've heard the NBA is broken, they shoot too many threes. Well, the Cavs are the best offense in basketball now. They're taking over 44% of their shots from beyond the arc. And I am here to tell you guys, there is nothing wrong with that at all.
I mean, we talk about the record. We talk about the shooting percentages. We talk about all those things. The Cavs are on pace for 72 wins, guys. 72. Yeah. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I came into the season being like, I'm happy with 60. And I think that might be their floor now.
We threw a party with 60 before the season. They're over-under on FanDuel, which sponsors this show. Shout out to FanDuel. Was 49.5. Like, that's a 10-win increase from last season. And Ethan, I don't mean to cut you off, but that leads right into Tony's kind of topic here is, at this point, Tony, there are still some people that have hesitations about the Cleveland Cavaliers being legitimate title contenders in the grand scheme of things. What do you say to those people who have not fully embraced the Cavaliers' greatness thus far in 2024, 2025?
You know, in 2025, one of my resolutions is to be more mature myself and not get dragged into the mess of NBA discourse all the time. So what I'm going to say to those people at this point is, I don't care anymore. If you're not willing to take this Cavs team seriously, that's your problem. Because, and I understand, listen, it's a thing in all of sports, especially the NBA. No one really takes a team seriously until they win something. I understand that's how it works. The Cavs do still have things to prove, but listen, man, as Ethan said, they're on a 72-win pace. They're 29-4. There's only 3 teams in the last 30 seasons who have had a better win percentage entering the new year. So if you can't take that seriously, that's kind of your problem. They've been one of the best defenses in the NBA for the last 3 years, and now we're seeing them put it together on the offensive end of the floor, as we highlighted. And so my whole viewpoint here is who cares? I'm done worrying about the national media or anyone who's not taking them seriously. All I know is I'm watching truly elite basketball every night, and I'm just going to enjoy it because this is a Cavs team that, I feel vindicated for being a core four believer, as many of us are. And we're seeing it all come together in a way that just makes sense. They're not doing anything that feels fluky. Yes, the three-point shooting is off the charts, but they're generating clean looks. You got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland creating advantages for not 48 minutes because they don't even have to play 48 minutes. They're killing teams, but it just all makes sense. This has been Kobe Altman has done a great job building this roster, patching up the gaps in the supporting cast over the last few years, and knock on wood, as long as they stay healthy, this is a title contender to me. I mean, I think they're officially at that point. Are they the favorites? Are they, I won't get into that, but they're very clearly one of the teams who has a legit chance at winning the title.
Even?
I mean, I said it when I came on to the show, man. Like, this is a title contender team. Like, there are people, smarter people than I in the NBA world, that have 3 teams in contention for the championship: the Celtics, the Cavs, and the OKC Thunder. Because those are the 3 teams that we understand can get to that level, can play to that caliber when it comes to the later months of the season. And sure, you don't want to talk about the playoff blunders in the last couple of years, but those are experiences that this team has needed, right? This is now about 2.5 years into the Donovan Mitchell experience in the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they've been to the playoffs each season and are continuing to make the moves that are necessary to improve. And what I've been seeing with Kenny Atkinson is, sure, the core four is important, as we all know, but it's not just about them, right? It's about empowering everybody on this team. You talk about going to George Niang, Karis LeVert, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade. They've all said it either on record or on the sideline, in the locker room, whatever, about how they are able to do things that they wouldn't be able to last year or under JB Bickerstaff with Kenny Atkinson at the helm. And that's important because it's giving them the growth and the power to play without fear. And that's something that's needed with this Cavs team, especially as they're still young. The oldest player on the core four, or of the core members, is Donovan Mitchell at 28. They got a long runway to work with.
And they're all under contract too, which may be the biggest benefit to the entire equation here for the Cavs. Is them and Oklahoma City have the 2 best cap situations and cap sheets over the next 4 or 5 years, dealing with all the implications and difficulties of the first apron, the second apron. We don't have to dive into that, or we could spend the next 4 hours kind of discussing what is and what isn't legal, depending on who we're talking about. But when I look at the Cavs, and to Tony's point earlier, if you don't believe in this team because you need to seed in the playoffs first, well, what's the point of having a conversation then? Because we can't fast forward or super sim the season to get to the playoffs until they play the next 50-something games. So whatever. I think there are some valid concerns that some of the things they're doing in the regular season, how does that translate over to a postseason series against a team when the scouting's more in depth? You play them night in, night out for a 7-game series, but those concerns are all concerns for another day. I think at this point of the year, on January 1st, when you look at any team across the league, to determine whether or not they are or are not a title contender, they just have to meet certain criteria. And I think the Cavs, and at least in my mind, these are the criteria you need to hit to be able to consider yourselves a true championship contender. Can you score the ball efficiently and effectively in a number of different ways? The Cavs are the number 1 offense in basketball right now, and I think they're in the top 3 all-time of offensive ratings at the moment. I believe they're top 3, so okay, check that. Can you get a stop if you need to? They're top 10 in defense. They've been a number 1 defense in the league before. Yes, they have smaller guards, but I really liked how Darius Garland fought against Jason Tatum when they kept hunting out those mismatches a few weeks ago. Evan Mobley is a perennial all-NBA defensive caliber player. Jarrett Allen's a plus defender. Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, whoever else you throw out there. They have enough guys that I do feel pretty confident. If they need to get a stop, they have the ability to. They have a coach with championship experience or experience coaching at a high enough level. Atkinson has a ring with Golden State. He was in the gold medal game with Team France. I feel confident that Kenny Atkinson is not going to shrink under the brightest lights. Can this team be flexible and beat you in a different number of ways? They can go tiny. They could go 1 big. They could go supersized with Dean Wade at the 3 and 2 giants. They can match your line of flexibility depending on what they need to in different situations. And most importantly, do they like each other? And Ethan, you and I are in the locker room. You're there more than I am. I've been around a lot of locker rooms, not necessarily just the NBA. This is the only NBA locker room I've ever been around, but colleges, high schools, baseball teams. The chemistry between these guys is not common. Like what you're seeing in Cleveland, and Spencer Davies does a great job putting together those little reels afterwards, and Serena Winters, and everyone's kind of picked up on it because they get a ton of retweets and likes. So it's great social media traction. But there's a reason for it. It's because they're awesome. And I'm telling you, and even last year, Ethan, you were in their locker room with me then. It wasn't like that last year. And I'm not saying they didn't dislike each other last season. I just think they feel more free. Winning creates that kind of atmosphere and vibe. And I think they'd go to war for each other. I truly, genuinely think they would go to war for each other. I think you could have made the case for it last year. I don't think there's any debate or any doubt about it this year. They have the 4 things I think you need to be a title contender. And anyone who says they're not, go sit on a needle or something. I don't know. Like, you're just being a humbug, Christmas Scrooge. Like, I don't know. You probably drink milk. You probably drink water in your cereal. So,
but before I let Tony go into his next topic, because I know we're getting to that point. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Cavs are the only team in the NBA that have had multiple games with four or more players score 20 or more points in a game. And the Cavs have done it 5 times.
It feels common when they do it. Like, it doesn't even seem shocking anymore.
It's not always the core 4 either. We talk about that again, right? It's Max Strus who came in with 15 yesterday. You talk about how Dean Wade comes in with 20, and we can go back to last year with his 20-point fourth quarter against the Boston Celtics, where he was named the Celtics killer, right? This is all the different intricacies of this team. And the most important one, and you hit on it, Mike, was how important it is that this team likes each other, but they love each other. They will go to bat for each and every player in this locker room. And it's not an understanding of like, oh, egos are here, but I would rather help you become better and win a championship than have an ISO game and be behind the 8 ball.
I just saw a stat real quick, and then Tony chime in, but Sam Quinn was sent this during the show. The Cavs have 21 double-digit wins this year. All but 5 other teams, Celtics, Knicks, Thunder, Grizzlies, and Rockets, have fewer than 20 total wins. So just goes to show you the level of domination we've seen thus far. Tony, you're on the outside looking in at some of these locker rooms, shenanigans in a good way. Can you feel it from your perspective, kind of seeing it via social media as opposed to in person? Do you get the same sense Ethan and I get from seeing it up close and personal?
I would say definitely. I mean, anytime you got a dancing frog following the team around, things are clearly going well. I said it at the start of the year. Vibes matter in the NBA and sports in general. That team chemistry, the vibes, it all really does matter. And the Cavs right now, like we've seen it, they just look like they love playing together. And in all honesty, it starts with Donovan Mitchell just being that leader, having no issue saying, hey, I'll take the sacrifice as far as my touches, my individual numbers. Like, I understand that Evan Mobley is really important to this team's ceiling, so I'm going to do everything I can to get him going. We've seen it with Darius Garland last year when DG was struggling with confidence. Donovan Mitchell said, hey, I trust you. I want you to keep shooting. We saw it Game 7 against Orlando, giving him the ball back after he just missed that three-pointer. DG hits it, and Donovan Mitchell's like his number one fan cheering him on. The fact that we've had Mitchell accept this leadership role, and it's really trickled down all the way to someone like Jarrett Allen, who's a very selfless player. Allen's had no issue being 4th on the ladder here. And we've seen when it's his time to step up, he does it. He dominated Anthony Davis. I won't say he dominated Jokic, but he played very, very well against Jokic both times. And that's your 4th best player doing that and having no issue accepting the 4th highest amount of money, the 4th most touches, like all across the board. This team has been so selfless, and it's because they've really bought into the system that Kenny Atkinson has built, and they all trust each other. And I think we've seen, again, top to bottom, that empowerment, whether it's Dean Wade looking more confident, Okoro looking more confident. Everyone seems to have bought into their role. And I mean, the results speak for themselves. And
it starts with Donovan. When your leader is willing to sacrifice, then you look like a giant a-hole if you're the 4th or 5th best guy and you're not, right? And Donovan has done a tremendous job. I mean, he's averaging the fewest points of his career, or not of his career, but in the last like 4 or 5 years, all his numbers are down. In the traditional stats, he's obviously playing fewer minutes, which is part of it. But yeah, when you have a guy like Donovan who's willing to sacrifice for the greater good of the team, everyone else kind of falls into line, and it's a trickle-down effect. And Kenny Atkinson and that coaching staff deserve a lot of credit for getting Donovan to buy in and realize by lessening my load and giving some others the opportunity, it's better for the greater good of the whole situation. And one guy who's benefited from that is Darius Garland, who has refound his previous form. I know some of the numbers don't look necessarily like they've blown up, but the eye test tells you Darius is playing as good a basketball as we have ever seen. And the conversation around whether or not Darius is going to make the All-Star team was what Mac was going to lead us into. So I'm going to do my best without doing a full prep because that was Mac's job to give you my 2 cents on this. Darius Garland is playing at an All-Star level. There is no debate about that whatsoever. He is playing at an All-Star level. Will he make the Eastern Conference All-Star team? I don't know. The Cavs deserve 3 All-Stars. I think they're going to end up getting 2. My gut tells me that'll be Donovan and Evan because the amount of really good guards having really good seasons in the Eastern Conference is loaded, and some guys just get name recognition honorees to making that All-Star squad. I don't know how he's going to make it in there. He certainly deserves it. He's playing his absolute tail off. His clutch numbers, even though they haven't had a ton of clutch situations, are incredible. His shooting numbers are incredible. He's almost in the 50-40-90 club. Actually, he might be after last night's game. Let me double check that real quick.
I think he's right below it.
Yeah, 49.3%. He's 0.7% away from the 50-40-90 club. His turnovers is down. His assists are up. He's moving without the ball. He's having an incredible season. It's a shame that he may not be rewarded with the recognition he rightfully deserves. But I'm not saying he can't make the All-Star team. I'm just saying those coaches, whoever ends up being the Eastern Conference coaching staff, is going to have a hell of a time deciding who is and who isn't one of those 4 or 5 guards they keep on the roster. There's some really, really, really talented guards having good seasons. And Darius may end up being the odd man out, but that is nothing short of what he's actually doing and contributing on the court. He's been terrific for Cleveland this year.
Yeah, when you just looking at guys who I know are for sure considered guards because the positions get weird in the NBA. In the Eastern Conference, like Donovan Mitchell's he's a lock. Jalen Brunson's a lock. After that, I would say to me personally, Trae Young and Cade Cunningham probably belong there. But other than those guys, I wouldn't have any other guards ahead of Darius Garland in the East. And I think you could argue he should be in there ahead of Trae Young and Cade Cunningham. But like Cade, since it's his breakout year, I assume he'll make it. Part of the reason I'm assuming why we both think Evan Mobley will be a lock for the Cavs is because of that breakout factor. I think you get a little boost to your momentum there. But as far as Darius Garland, you kind of nailed it. Like, regardless of whether or not he makes it, he's absolutely deserving of a spot this year. I think this is the best basketball he's ever played. Again, I think he's matured into just a complete floor general who he has control of everything going on out there, right on the verge of 50-40-90. His per 36 numbers are basically all career best. His turnovers are at a career low, and he's playing really good defense on top of all of that. Like, we'll highlight that matchup against Jason Tatum because it was the most impressive, but just throughout the whole year, he's played really solid defense, but at the best of his career, I think. And again, all while shooting super efficient from the floor, finishing at the rim, which is a big development for him, taking care of the ball. He's always been a very good playmaker, but again, the turnovers are at a career low. And he's doing it all efficiently across the board, not just in terms of shooting, but he's playing 30 minutes per game. It's like he goes out there, takes care of business, and then he sits for the fourth quarter. And so to me, I think he deserves it. Will he get there? It's going to be tough. I do think the Cavs have 2 guaranteed spots. I will be stunned if they don't get Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley in the game. Garland, I'll be sad if he doesn't make it, but I wouldn't be too surprised, although I think he definitely deserves it.
Ethan, before you go, if you're in the chat, throw a 1 in the chat if you think Darius, not if he deserves it or not, will make the All-Star team. Give me a 1 if you think he will make the All-Star team, a 2 if you think, unfortunately, he will not be one of the Eastern Conference guards selected. 1 for he will, 2 for he won't. Ethan, the floor is yours.
I just think it's so difficult in today's NBA. And we were talking about this before we got on the podcast, because when you talk about the different positioning and how they are labeled and all these different things. Is Jaylen Brown a forward? Is he a guard? Has Tyrese Maxey played enough games to get the All-Star recognition, even though he's playing out of his mind, right? These are the different conversations I think we have to have, and it's going to be a difficult one. And I don't have a vote in the All-Star, unfortunately, this year, but our guy Cleveland at Cleveland.com, Chris Fedor, surely does. So I don't.
You had one last year, Ethan?
I did not.
Oh, I was gonna say you got to open up. We got to start every podcast with NBA All-Star voter Ethan Sands. Okay.
We'll get there. But yeah, I just think it's interesting when you talk about the numbers that Darius has been putting up. And Tony, you did a great job of breaking it down what he's doing, especially per 36. But when you talk about his impact and what he's been able to do with less minutes, I feel like it's difficult to have a conversation where all these other players are either the point guard or the shooting guard of their team, and they are either the most valuable player on their team or the highest scorer on their team. So you talk about how those two different things come into an aspect of where Darius Garland falls in, especially in a season where he's playing less minutes than he has in the past. So I definitely think it's an interesting conversation. But Darius Garland, as we've all agreed, is more than deserving of a spot. It's just whether he'll get a come off the bench role, because he won't be a starter.
Yeah, I mean, these are just some of the guards that we know for sure are guards. Jaylen Brown's that weird one that are kind of in the conversation. If we assume that Brunson and Mitchell are your two starters, which I think that's pretty set in stone. LaMelo Ball, their team stinks, but he is averaging 37 and 6. Maxey, as Ethan mentions, averaging 26, 5, and 4. Damian Lillard, the Bucks are playing much better. He's averaging 25, 7.5, and 4.5. Tyler Hero is the favorite to win sixth man of the year right now. He's averaging 24, 6, and 6. Cunningham, I agree with Tony. I think he's a lock. Trae Young's at 22 points, 12 assists to lead the league. And then you have the three guards on Boston, Derek White, Pritchard, and Holiday. And then you have the shooting guards, if you even want to sparse it out even further. I mean, none of these guys technically or really should be in the conversation, but you get the point. There are a lot of guys that have numbers that are worthy of all-star consideration. We're going to find out if Darius gets the nod or not. I do think team record and team success should matter in a tiebreaker scenario. And if it comes down to that, we talked about it earlier. The Cavs are 29-4. If you haven't heard, they're the best team in basketball. So Darius should get the nod, but we'll find out on that. Guys, we got about 8 minutes before we have to wrap up here. So I want to get to our last topic. And it's just a real quick, some New Year's resolutions for us in terms of how we approach the Cavs and things that maybe we learned in 2024 that we're ready to solidify in 2025. And for me, I have two that are tied together. One, people who are already saying Max Strus stinks, calm down. Like, he just came back. He's on a minutes restriction. He hasn't played organized professional basketball in 7 months. He's still working his way back into shape. Like, let's give the guy a month, 15, 20 games before we make any sweeping conclusions of let's bury him on the bench, send him to the Cleveland Charge. Like, just relax, okay? Okay? Like, just relax. The main point I wanted to make, though, I've always thought this, and now we have the legitimate numbers to back it up. You can't spell the Cavs win again, dominate in terrifying fashion without Dean Wade. And I know it's a mouthful, but when Dean Wade plays, the Cavs are incredible. And his availability is his biggest weakness. I am fully aware of the fact that if you are counting on Dean Wade to be healthy for 60 games, you may end up being very disappointed. However, they are 89-33 since the Donovan Mitchell trade when Dean Wade plays, and they are 39-36 without him. That is a gigantic difference. It's a 62 win pace, I believe, versus a 43 win pace. Dean Wade's in the right spot every time. He's a good enough shooter. He's a better rebounder than he gets credit for. All the advanced analytics show the Cavs are a better rebounding team with any lineup as long as Dean Wade's on the floor. He's a plus defender. He has size. He doesn't need the ball. He doesn't complain. Dean Wade I would vote for Dean Wade for president, for being honest. My point is,
right there
the Cavs don't have a question of who should start at the three. If Dean Wade's healthy, the answer is Dean Wade, and I won't hear any ifs, ands, buts about it.
You can't steal both of our New Year's resolutions, Mike. Like, you understand that you have two of the biggest Dean Wade supporters also on the show. Like, I mean, the stat that you listed is out of this world, right? And in this season, they have lost one game with Dean Wade on the floor. The other three losses that they have, Dean Wade wasn't available. And if you think that's too small of a sample size, listen to what Mike said. Right? Like 89 wins over the last 2.5 years with Donovan Mitchell is what the Cavs have done with Dean Wade, right? And you mentioned it. The size alongside Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen and the rebounding aspect, the defensive aspect, it is a completely different game when Dean Wade is on the floor. And sure, you can say Max Strus did his best against Jason Tatum in the Boston Celtics series in the Eastern Conference semifinals last year. But why do you think Dean Wade rushed back so fast and played on one leg in the last 3 games of that series if he thought he was doing a good enough job, right? Because Dean Wade came back and didn't say exactly what happened to him. He just said, yeah, there's just some tears and stuff in my knee, and I'm still going to play on it. Like, the man didn't have surgery this summer either. He just recovered enough because he's a country boy and said he's going to thug it out, right? But when you talk about what Dean Wade has done on the floor, you speak of playing teams like the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Bucks, New York, even Philly, teams with a substantial big and other large wings, especially when discussing how much Kenny Atkinson splits the minutes of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Although Allen can protect the paint on his own, having Wade as an option to slide as the power forward or small forward alongside George Niang gives the Cavs more defensive versatility with Wade's ability to guard 1 through 5 without decreasing their spacing on the offensive end. And Max Strus's minute restriction will be fully lifted soon. And we got the first taste of that on Tuesday against the Lakers. And he had 15 points. He was integral in starting that bench unit. He showed his impact off the bench, and it adds another weapon in Kenny Atkinson's tool belt of options to go in late game scenarios with another starter caliber player to stifle and overpower opposing benches. You imagine throwing Max Strus out there and say, hey, you get to play against their C team. What are opposing teams going to do? Like, he's going to torch them. And I heard this from Spencer Davies the other day, and I think it is very important. The Cavs can start Dean Wade, but they don't have to finish with him. Mm-hmm. You have so many different options, whether you want to go to Isaac, Max, Karras, whoever is playing well. The matchups that are very important on this team is why Kenny Atkinson has been seen as the best coach upgrade, because he's made adjustments on the fly.
Tony, you can add to the Wade parade if you want, or you could take us in a different direction here to wrap us up with the New Year's resolution.
Well, I can never turn down an opportunity to talk about Dean Wade. No matter how many times he has hurt me, I can't quit Dean Wade. I always buy back in. And it's really easy to see why, because when he's healthy and when he's available and when he's feeling confident, because sometimes he just runs cardio up and down the floor in the past, he doesn't always take initiative. But this year, as we talk about Kenny Atkinson, he's managed to get everyone to buy in and feel empowered. And so Dean Wade, we see the vision. He's the two-way connective piece that they've been looking for on the wing when he's doing all those things. He's legitimately one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. Like, this guy's like straight up borderline all defensive caliber. He'll never quite get that recognition, but he's such an underrated defender, guarding 1 through 5. He'll take any matchup that you throw at him, and he does a good job. And then on the other end of the floor, legit 3-point shooter, not a volume shooter, but a legit shooter. He can space the floor. He's a perfect fit next to the core 4. And we've seen a little bit. He can put the ball on the floor and attack a closeout. He's not, Giannis or anything, but he can do a little bit. He's multifaceted on both ends of the floor. So I love Dean Wade. I'm all in there. But the other resolution that I actually have 2. I can make them real quick because I know we're getting close to our 40-minute mark. 1, the broadcasting crew. Please, we don't need close-ups of every player while the game is going on. We keep missing live action because the broadcast is showing instant replays and zooming in on people on the bench. Leave that in 2024, please. We don't need that. Cut it down by like 50%. And then my last resolution, just for the Cavs as a whole, we talked about this a little bit. I would like them to stay firmly in the top 10 for defensive rating. They're already in there. I think they're 8th right now. We've seen them slip a little bit at times in November. People were a little worried. Listen, it's asking a lot to be the best offensive team and a top 10 defense. But like we said all episode, I think they're a legit title contender. And if you're a legit title contender, you're playing elite ball on both ends of the floor. So I just don't want them to get complacent on that end of the floor as the year goes on. I want them to keep the heat turned up on defense because we know what they're capable of.
We got 2 super chats to wrap up the show. The first one comes from Salish Sastre, I hope I pronounced that right, who says the Cavs, not just the best team, but the most likable as well. And then Andy says, with Mobley's max contract kicking in next season, the Cavs will have 3 max players. Can they still sign its own players like LeVert, Jerome without league minimum? I see Ethan kind of going like this. You can explain it if you want, Ethan.
Well, we don't have enough time for us to explain this entirety, but I think it's difficult, right? Because you talk about where they are in the luxury tax, but I think the most reassuring thing I can say to Cavs fans is that Dan Gilbert has proven that he's willing to spend money if it's gonna pay off in the end. Because if they have guys, and Caris LeVert is the 6th man of the year, which we believe has played to that caliber, and talking about 50, 40, 90. Ty Jerome has been in that conversation as well for a majority of the season. Where does this team end up? Who do the Cavs need? Do they bring up Amani Bates to take over Caris LeVert's role next year? Do they do the same thing for Ty Jerome? It's a different conversation when we talk about salary cap, when we talk about the money aspect of it. And as Mike, you said it earlier, the legal portion of it and how you can make it legal. I just think it's very difficult when you talk about the new CBA and the luxury tax and all those different things, the second apron, first apron, and how those can hinder the Cavs team when it comes to draft picks and all those different things coming out of next year. So I think it's going to be tough to sign both of them. So pick your favorite, but I think it's definitely something that the Cavs are going to look to do if they can.
I think they have the bird rights to LeVert too. So there's ways to keep most of this team intact. And also, they're only over the luxury tax right now. They're not over the first apron. They're not anywhere near the second apron. They have some money to spend, but as we all know, those extensions kick in next year, which is going to boost them up closer than they are. Ethan, Tony, appreciate you guys hopping on. Tony, you want to tell the people where they can find you online, your work, your social media handles, all the above?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can connect again and talk Cavs soon. And yeah, you can find me at Tony_Pesta on Twitter and YouTube. I do my own podcast, The Junkyard Pod, and I also write for Fear the Sword. So check out what we got going on over there. Thanks for having me.
I did a podcast with Tony 2 or 3 weeks ago. Tony, I went on the Junkyard Pod with you, and we did some first half season grades. Ethan, where can the good people out there find you and your work?
Again, to reiterate, Tony, this has been fun, y'all. Mike, appreciate you having me on. Very much needed to make my debut over here. A lot of fun being had. But you guys can find me at Cleveland.com. I'm one of the beat reporters alongside Chris Fedor. I also am one of the hosts for the Wine and Gold Talk podcast, all at Cleveland.com/Cavs. But yeah, we got a lot more coming for you guys this season. It's 2025, y'all. Let's tap in.
We're going for the record. 73-9 is in play on a 72-win pace, and there's no signs of slowing down. We appreciate everyone tuning in here to the Ultimate Cavs Show. We are back tomorrow, regular schedule, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, 11 to 1. We're also doing a live Buckeyes postgame show with Tyvis coming up after the Rose Bowl, so make sure you guys tune into that. For Tony, for Ethan, I'm McNuggets. Peace and go Cavs.